Oh, the thrill of being involved. Even now, I mean, my first involvement in horse ownership was at Timeform. Phil Bull had a disappointing flat horse with Barry Hills called Carneades, which he leased to a group of us that wanted to get involved, and you could get in for as little as a 60th. I took a 12th, and he was great fun. He won 3 hurdle races and a race on the flat. Peter Easterby by now had him, and you know, just that small involvement only fueled a desire to get involved in a bigger way, and it took a while, but eventually I had enough money to have a share with some friends, and then I got involved in a couple of brood mares and was lucky enough to breed a couple of quite good horses that we sold. One of them was Decorated Hero, who was part of Frankie Dettori's Magnificent Seven, and actually breeding a winner, it's almost like it's not, obviously it's not quite the same as being involved with children, but you feel it belongs to you even if you've sold it. Yeah, it's a very expensive hobby. It's a great sport as long as the money doesn't run out. I mean, 7%, only 7% of most of the yearlings sold at public European auctions ever win any sort of a race. So that figure alone illustrates there is quite a high wastage, and you've got to know what you're doing before you get involved. There's an old saying in racing: if you don't like someone, give them a broodmare. If you absolutely hate them, give them 2. There's a common misconception in racing that most jockeys make a lot of money. Most jockeys are on the breadline or worse. Most jockeys. The prize money returns are so bad in Britain at the moment for the run-of-the-mill racing that I don't know how many of them, you know, how most of them make ends meet. They work incredibly hard hours. They have to. You have to get on racing's treadmill. If you don't, somebody else will jump into your shoes. Have races been affected by the new whip rules? Without question. The way jockeys think, their mindset has to be affected. Now, in some cases it will have made no difference, in some cases it will have made little difference. Brian Harding very early on copped a 9-day ban for lifting a novice chaser off the ground twice, giving it 2 or 3 backhanders each time, getting up and driving it up the stiff hill at Hexham. He copped a 9-day ban. The next time he said, well, if that happens, you know, the next time I'm in a situation where a horse is jumping badly, I certainly won't be hitting it. I certainly won't be trying to pick it up. I'll just pull it up. Because if that's what's going to happen to me for, quotes, giving it a ride, getting it round and trying my best to win, and the backhanders I've given it to make it concentrate and motivate it are tallied to the ones I gave it to ride a finish and effectively take 9 days off my livelihood, I can't afford to. This report, which runs to 70+ pages, the detail in this concerning the statistics, the number of runners that have been analysed, the race courses, the whip, how it's changed, what it is, and specific and detailed veterinary analysis of the number of horses that have been wheeled, what constitutes a wheel, what constitutes where it's appropriate that a horse should get a reminder, is enlightening, well written, lucid. So anybody going onto the BHA's website can download this and they'll learn a lot more. And the statistical analysis of a 4.5-year period, which comprised nearly 700,000 runners, showed that in that time, British racing had seen 6,000 whip offences. Well, when you express that as a percentage, that's 0.75. So in the final analysis, are you going to make changes? And let's not be complacent about this. The reason racing doesn't have a problem with the wider public and the RSPCA and things like that is because, on a day-to-day basis, from a welfare perspective, it is very well policed. By comparison, if you take that very brief outline of what I've said this report is and just go onto the website and look at the RSPCA's section on animal abuse, interestingly, over a 4-year period as well, I think racing compares very favourably. On average, the RSPCA get 1.3 million complaints a year about domestic animal abuse. approximately 10% of these necessitate a follow-up, so the RSPCA actually go and inquire, has that cat been swung by the tail, etc., whatever. We're talking about domestic animals. And last year, more than 2,500 people suffered sanctions, either a prison sentence, fines, etc., because of that. There hasn't been one in racing in that time. So we can't be complacent, but overall, I think that the statistics in that report have been used in a negative way by the BHA, when they could easily have been said, yeah, the Grand National was not an edifying sight, we are aware of that. Partly that was our fault, because we should have communicated that the scenes they saw immediately afterwards with regard to the water were precautionary. No horses were dehydrated, as it turned out. There were sanctions against the rider of Balabriggs, whose whip use didn't look bad, but who, in relation to our rules, only marginally broke them. So there was a knee-jerk reaction, a severe penalty, which resulted in the jockeys feeling hard done by, not unreasonably, and the fact that that alone kept the situation at the headlines with regard to racing for 5 weeks. Yeah, there's a disproportionate number of whip offences on a total of 6 race courses, 5 of which are jumps courses with either long, steep or uphill finishes. So why is there a one-size-fits-all attitude to jump racing? Don't get me wrong, if I haven't made the point, much of this, if this had had a commensurate section from a leading riding practitioner, even someone like an instructor like Yogi Breisner, who's not a racing man out now, or a leading jockey who's now retired, or a leading trainer with top-class riding experience, it would have been the complete package. This is a very, very good document and very interesting. And for me, as somebody that was always a little bit, well, you know, you hear all these animal aid people and you hear RSPCA and are we cruel? And this gives me the confidence to say, yeah, it must be well policed, but actually, we do a brilliant job day in, day out with racing and the way we look after our horses. Well, Racing for Change came about because at great expense it's been identified that there are approximately 9 million alpha males in Britain between the ages of 18 and 45 who do not currently watch or participate in racing in any shape or form.
9 million.
9 million. Now, if we have British Champion Series, we'll not only have wonderful days racing and we'll showcase a lot of our major races far better than we do. We will attract a significant number of the alpha male population that currently go racing. That's what we were told, provided they can have £750,000 a year marketing money for the next 3 years. The same way as it intrigued you and me, I didn't go in knowing what the difference between 6 to 4 and 13 to 8 was, or when we first got involved. I went with his grandchildren, my colleague's grandchildren, what, 6 weeks ago? One's 8 and one's 6, 2 girls. They like horses a little bit, but they were, one of them actually wasn't that keen on going. But the colour of the day, the fact they engaged, they picked out the horse they liked, and one of them won, and Mummy put £1 each way on for her. Well, you know,
that's where it starts.
That's where it starts. And they can't wait to go again. They got a face painted, had an ice cream, they stroked a real racehorse. They were engaged with it. They weren't there just to go in the creche out of the way while Mummy and Daddy or Grandad swan on. They became part of the day, and that's how you get them involved. Brigadier Gerard, believe it or not, I never actually saw in the flesh. He's a horse I admire most from perspective of performance. These form books are, when I went to Timeform, the senior handicapper was John Clark, and he was the most meticulous, neat man. And when he left, he was presented with his form books, and some years later he came back and said, look, I really don't use these, and he gave them to Reg Griffin, who was then the chairman and my partner. And when Reg passed on, he left them to me, and there's about 40 volumes. And you can see all the figures in here, the Timeform pencil in the figure, the rating and the horse recorded.
I'll take a shot at this.
And if you turn to Brigadier Gerard, throughout his career, his 3-season career, he had 11 performances that you could safely say were top class, 11 out of 18, 17, which is a hell of a... I mean, a lot of horses, you know, reach 3 or 4, 1 or 2 maybe more than that, but 11, and the distance, you know, to win Group 1 races from 6 furlongs to a mile and a half, which he did, Group 1 races as we know them today, from the Middle Park to a King George, is, you know, it's a fantastic achievement.
And in the flesh, your favourite?
I started at Timeform in '74, and I got a job after years of pestering somebody to give me a chance because other people turned it down on the track in 1980. So Shergar was one of the very best horses I've seen in the flesh. He was a brilliant, brilliant Derby winner. A huge admirer of Deja, who was a fantastic sprinter, and Dubai Millennium was undoubtedly a brilliant horse on his day. And more recently, of course, we've been blessed to see the likes of See the Stars, and, you know, Frankel is a fantastic horse. Well, Vernon, I mean, you will never change it along the lines that Racing for Change is prescriptive, because, of course, they describe people like me, or anybody remotely like me, as a purist or a traditionalist. And this is what, well, it's actually a tag that really, really annoys me. Because if you break racing down to its simplest matter, what do? What do we race? We race thoroughbreds. We don't just race horses, we race thoroughbreds. And I'm not being all precious about this. What does a thoroughbred have to have? What does every single one of these in here have to run? Has to have a minimum of 8 generations of thoroughbred parentage as recognised by one of the 63 racing stud books around the world. It can't run without them. Some of them have got 24, 25. So the one thing a thoroughbred has, the one thing that is important to it, is it, and differentiates it from other horses, it has a recognisable pedigree. Now, because it has a recognisable pedigree, it is interpretable, if there is such a word. You can interpret it in some shape or form. We can't get it right all the time, but you and I like to look at form, and we get some of it right, because we can analyse what's gone on before, and what the parentage or the ancestors of every horse leads us to believe that their sons and daughters will be able to do. We can make enough of it work to satisfy other people that it's worth following. In turn, even the bloke that goes into his Hills, Corals, Ladbrokes, whatever on a Saturday, and just has a look up on the wall, oh, that's out of a Rainbow Quest mare. He might not know much about pedigrees, or might not even be interested, but he knows a little bit. He's engaging with the history of it. If you just present racing as it's another piss-up, another ladies' day, they all work. They're fine in the, you know, another pop concert, great. But you'll never get people to engage with it unless you teach them. In the same way, you'll never change people's perception about the whip, oh, racing's cruel, unless as this report's done, you actually show them what the whip is, how it's changed, tell these people who come, oh, it's cruel. It's not cruel. This is what we do. Racing for Change hasn't gone down that route, and until it does, all they're doing is wasting money. They might get a big one-off crowd, but they won't get people following the sport.